Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI V-Chapter meeting. Brace yourselves, because the Internet of Things is coming. I'm Rob Evelyn. I'm the V-Chapter Vice President of Programs, and I will be covering a few housekeeping items before we launch into our presentation. If you experience any difficulties in the webinar itself, you can get help by clicking on the green question mark at the bottom of your screen. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during this webcast. Click on the red Q&A button and just type your question into the Ask a Question text area. Then click the Submit button. At this time, we recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers. To chat with others who are attending today, click on the group chat button at the bottom right of your screen. We love having you exchange ideas during the webinar. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Download Slide button locating in the presentation window. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please visit our help guide by clicking on the help link below the media player. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is also located in the webcast help guide. You can connect with HDI on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and on the hdiconnect.com, where you can read a blog, ask a question, or find a solution. First, we have a poll. Please take a few minutes to answer the questions on this poll. A few more seconds and we'll present your answers. When you think of the Internet of Things, what is included in your definition? Please be sure to select all that you think apply. Ready? Here we go. And there are your results. First up today, we will hear from our sponsor, Logmein Incorporated. Joining us today is Dave Campbell, Senior Director of Products. Dave leads product management and strategy for Logmein Rescue, the company's industry-leading remote services. Dave joined the Logmein products team in 2010 and has managed and led product direction for multiple Logmein businesses, including remote access, IT management, and customer engagement. Dave, it's over to you.
Thanks so much, Rob, and thanks everyone for joining today's webcast. Logmein is extremely pleased to be able to sponsor events like this. Just to give you a little bit of a background in case you're not familiar with Logmein, we are a global and public company, and what Logmein provides are SaaS-based solutions to enable you to connect people with computer devices and even things. And really, as testament to our active user base, we have over 50 million active users across over 500,000 customers, and we have worldwide operations. So we're roughly about 700 employees across 6 global offices, but supporting customers virtually anywhere. And as Rob mentioned, some of the key things that our services provide fall into 3 main categories. Customer engagement, which is why we're sponsoring the event today. It includes everything from live chat engagement with Bold Chat to remote support, and is expanding out into the Internet of Things with our Xively platform. In addition to that, we also have collaboration services and IT management solutions to really help businesses run and be effective. And our key flagship product around customer engagement, if you're not familiar, is Logmein Rescue. And Logmein Rescue is the gold standard in remote support today. We're a proven and trusted solution to allow contact centers and service desks to be able to have secure, scalable, and highly reliable solutions to be able to access and support computers and devices anywhere. And really, as a leader within this market, Logmein Rescue continues to innovate. And we started our platform with a simple premise, just being able to simply connect technicians to computers and laptops wherever they are so that you can bring those back up and resolve any issues. And we've expanded that out over the years to also support tablets and smartphones by providing remote support of mobile operating systems such as Android, iOS, Windows Mobile. And in the innovation front, we continue to bring out new features. So we're really excited to highlight and share a recently released feature called ReFU Lens, which provides a new breed of remote support connectivity. And this really is a gap bridger for moving from a non-IoT world into an IoT space. And it provides video-enabled support to be able to support virtually anything. And the key element here that helped us really define this feature is a simple premise around the ability to see the problem through your customer's eyes. So in your contact center or your service desk, you know, we've all been through that situation where trying to diagnose something over the phone, verbally, without being able to see really what's going on can take time, it takes patience, and then oftentimes it takes multiple efforts in order to help resolve issues. Well, we've released a new feature as part of our core Logmein Rescue platform that allows you to take a mobile camera on any end user's phone or tablet and be able to relay a secure video image back to the technician at HQ to be able to help diagnose and resolve a situation. And we even have some really intuitive whiteboarding features in there to help direct and save time and effort in terms of how a call can be brought to resolution the first time and avoid redoing and avoid the purpose of a truck roll in many instances. And essentially, from Logmein's perspective, our main motto is simply possible. So, you know, with this feature, we want to make it as intuitive and as easy as a process so that the technician, in the case of this situation, can get an eye quickly on the problem and resolve it without having to go through multiple steps. And there's only 3 things that need to occur here. Is we send out a quick code to download a small app to the mobile device. Once that launches, you point the camera at the solution, and then we're going to stream that information back to the technician so that they can see. So, in an effort not to go on and on, we wanted to introduce you to Paula and just show you a quick example of how this can work in the real world.
For most companies, the hardest part of customer support is that often it takes longer to identify the problem than it does to actually solve it. Introducing ReFU Lens, the first true customer-assisted support solution. Lens allows your customers to show you the problem, rather than having to explain it. So customer service agents see exactly what the customers see. This is Paula. She's a bit of a perfectionist. That's especially true when there's a big client coming to the office, because Paula's the one who stays late to prep the reports. Prep the reports. Uh-oh, looks like Paula's run into a problem, and it's getting pretty late, and she's the last one here, and the meeting's the first thing in the morning. What the heck? But what if she could talk to a customer service agent who is using ReFU Lens? Okay, now the CS agent can see everything Paula sees, and quickly directs her to the trouble spot. It doesn't matter if she moves her phone.
This one here?
Yep, that's the one.
The CS agent still easily tracks the action. Without the help of a Lens-enabled CS agent, Paula ends up experimenting, and that pretty much puts her on the verge of a nervous breakdown. But with Lens, she's found the fix. and printing like a champ. The reports are prepped, and Paula's headed home for the night with not a hair out of place. Still no fix for that bumpy carpet, though.
All right, so that's just a quick example of just one of the areas where ReFU Lens may be applicable. And we're hearing great feedback from literally hundreds of our customers that have started to use this today, and this is available today, so that you can find out more information if you're interested by going to www.logmeinrescue.com. And as Rob mentioned at the beginning of the hour, the world is definitely changing as we start to move into this IoT-driven world. And thanks again for allowing us to sponsor, and I'll turn it over to Rob.
Hey, Dave, that was great information, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. Okay, everyone, now it's time on to the presentation. Brace yourself, because the Internet of Things is coming. That is today's topic. I'd like to introduce Anne DeMartine, a senior analyst on Forrester's Service Delivery Team, which serves I&O and service support and delivery professionals. Amy's current research is on the strategy, design, organization, and implementation of modern service delivery created through such methods as DevOps and resulting in continuous delivery. She has made over 20 years of experience in product management, product and technical marketing, development, and operations. Now, before we begin, and so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Amy.
Awesome, thank you. So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation. We are going to be talking, like Rob said, about the Internet of Things is coming. I am from Forrester Research, and we're going to talk about what is this Internet of Things. Some of you may be thinking it's already here. For those of you who aren't thinking it's already here, I'm going to show how it's kind of crept into all of our lives and is present today and will continue to be going forward. So I'm going to be talking about how we are going to increase our software control of the physical world. And it's this ability to combine sensors and our existing networks and analytics. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect physical objects into computing systems. And it's going to do that by, the whole goal is going to be to improve business outcomes. That's the whole driver for the Internet of Things. And so it's whether it's optimizing your physical asset utilization or differentiating products and services or transforming the customer experience, it's all about how do we improve business outcomes. But there are implications from the Internet of Things, especially for IT, and we'll look at what kinds of things you should be doing to brace yourselves for the Internet of Things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is redefining business in the connected world. What does it mean to have a connected world? Emerging connected world solution momentum. Is it science fact or science fiction? And then really addressing the IT management and other issues that will enable us, if we address them, to unleash our deployment opportunities. Okay, so imagine a connected world. The first thing I'm going to talk about is farms. I love this example because it just doesn't get any nitty-gritty-er than farms. So when you think about farms and being wired, think about wiring the actual dirt, where you have soil monitors that can remote control irrigation. You can have micro-weather forecasts to determine when you should water, how much you should water, when and where to plant, when to fertilize, how much to fertilize, and really optimizing your growing cycle on your farm. And I love that example. The next one are hospitals. And if any of you have been on a gurney waiting for an expensive piece of equipment to become free, unfortunately I have. It takes forever. You get parked in the hallway. It is not a good customer experience. But if you think about hospitals being instrumented and an RFID on the gurney and an RFID on the actual equipment so that you don't actually arrive until the equipment is free, people understand what that queue looks like, when it will become free, then you aren't parked in the hallway. It improves customer experience, increases the usage of the very expensive equipment, and really optimizes the whole hospital experience. And then the last but not least, the most exciting, kind of that home, all the devices that we carry. But the home, when you think about it, there's, of course, the Nest. I'm sure you guys have seen the ads where you can control your thermostat from on the road. And I have a colleague who, while we were in Vegas, was mucking with his home thermostat in London. And I was like, you know what? This may be all fun and games, but when your wife calls you, it will stop being fun and games. So other than actually using it for a toy, it actually is very useful where you can control your thermostat from wherever you should be. And it can also, hopefully tell when you're closer to your home. It can, do all sorts of great things. When you think about connected home, there are pieces showing up now to actually make that a reality. So when we take a step back and we look at the connected world and IoT solutions, they occur at the macro level all the way down to the micro level. So when we look at ads from the mega vendors, they always start at cities, which is probably not the right way to think about this because we don't have connected cities, and the steps to get to connected cities will be a long road. We won't have instantaneous connected cities, but certainly that's a goal. But if we start at the bottom, actually, and work our way up, and we talk about, okay, personal assets that are being that have sensors in them, appliances, consumer products, family assets, houses, cars, and then it builds up. Industrial and commercial assets have actually been have sensors in them for a long time, and I'll be talking about fleet tracking over and over again. That's one of our traditional Internet of Things applications, and maybe we haven't thought about it that way in before. Maybe we haven't thought of it as the Internet of Things, but actually fleet management is Internet of Things. Then we can talk about buildings and stores and factories, hospitals, campuses, like I was just talking about with the hospitals. Infrastructure systems actually is another kind of traditional sensor Internet of Things application, and then building into cities. But even you can go even smaller than your personal assets when you think about pill-shaped micro cameras that actually can traverse the human digestive tract and send back thousands of images to pinpoint a source of illness. So these can be very big and very small. And what we're going to see is we're not going to start with cities. We're going to start somewhere in the middle, down below, and they're going to be small applications and grow forward. So when we talk about the connected world, why do it? Yes, it's fun to mess with your thermostat when you're in Las Vegas and your family is at home in London. But why do we do it to begin with? And it's really because of these business outcomes. And I talked about this optimize, innovate, and transform, but let's talk about it for another minute here. When we think about what are we doing with these sensors, because really it's about sensors, and being able to monitor and measure them and then take action because of them. That means we can optimize our physical assets, for example. We can innovate by creating new products and services. We can transform our customer engagements by understanding where they are and what they're doing and how they experience the world and interact with their physical assets. And that then creates opportunities we didn't have before to open up either to optimize, innovate, or transform. Now, all of that sits on operations. And operations are those network connections, the data is the feed, and the software, the analysis is really the control. So this next it, and that's machine-to-machine technology. And the way to read this slide is to go from the bottom left up, and that the bottom left really shows the lower data versus the higher data. So as you go up, you get more and more data out of the sensors or out of the object, and less and less as you go down to the bottom left. And so you'll see at the bottom, grid sensors. Kind of near the middle is ATM kiosks. As you go up, tablets and video cameras can feed you a lot of data, and so can embedded data cards. So it's really, there's lots of consumer-focused devices. You need to expect different data levels depending on what is feeding you data. And so really that's what this slide is all about. Depending on where in the Internet of Things you're going to enter, depends on how much data to expect and what kinds of information or sensors you're going to get information from. Fleet tracking is a bit of an oddity, I might add. It's actually, you can get a lot of data from it, even though it's more industrial focused. And as you can tell, industrial focused is usually very, small data loads. They're very targeted information you're getting at. But fleet tracking can also be location, and it can also be temperatures. For example, we were talking to a client of Forrester's who does shipping, and they actually believe they can monitor not only where your package is, but the temperature that it's sitting at, so that if you order something, for example, food, it can actually tell you, what temperature it's at, if it's about to spoil or not, or if it's fine where it is. So fleet tracking can actually be more complicated data than you might expect. So what are these solutions and what do they look like? So we're going to start at the bottom of this slide and we're going to work our way up. The bottom machine-to-machine connection is awareness, where you've got cameras or RFIDs or GPS, meters, and really that is about monitoring, reporting, alerts, and it requires human intervention. So that's the first level. The next level up is analysis. So now, in addition to the monitoring and the reporting and the alerts, now we're talking about thresholds. Still human intervention, but the analytics are telling you, okay, if it reaches this level, now you need to start paying attention to this and make decisions based on it. The level above that is alternatives, and that's maybe where you're doing some predictive analysis. The trend is this, and therefore we need to make a decision because maybe water levels are rising. We need to redirect the flow of water so the city doesn't flood. Predictive analysis. You may still have human intervention at this point. You still may be alerting someone, hey, we've reached this threshold, and in addition, this is what it looks like. You need to make a decision in the next 20 minutes or the city will flood, for example. But those alternatives, once again, possibly human intervention, you might also be now taking corrective actions automatically. And then, of course, the top, which is action, where you actually are having it be automated, maybe with human supervision, but really that's where you require a return path. You're going to open a gate. You're going to flip a switch. You're going to take action. The computer is probably going to do that once again with human supervision, but going to do it on its own. The city is flooding. I've reached a threshold. I will now flip the gate and redirect the water to another location. So is the Internet of Things science fact or science fiction? And you'll see at this slide that, it's pretty low at this point. The adoption is not huge. But the most interesting thing is the year-to-year over growth. So as of today, we're at 17% are piloting, implementing, or expanding. And 28% are planning. But if we look at 2013, only 13% were piloting, implementing, or expanding, and 24% were planning to implement. So we've seen a 4% jump in both areas. Also remember, this market is huge. It affects every different industry in small incremental ways. So even though it's only a 4% growth, it's actually a huge jump in the amount of revenue that we're talking about from these products and services. So the stages of Internet of Things implementation are in three kind of stages. And the first stage is the personification of objects, where, we've got, and I need to advance the slide so you guys can see what I'm looking at. And there's a lot of words on here, and I'll even give you some additional examples. So we're just going to sit on this slide for a little bit. The Internet of Things isn't an on or an off. It isn't an is or an isn't. It is an evolution. And so when we start at slide 1 and we talk about the personification of an object, the example here is at the fridge where you can scan the barcode of your milk and it'll tell you when your milk is going sour or when your sour cream has gone bad. And so that's certainly an example. But another one could be where, you have a smart key, where my key, I don't actually have to put it in anywhere and turn. When I started driving, I actually had a key for the door and a key to turn the ignition. And at this point, the key is in my pocket, and the car knows when I'm close, and when I pull on the handle, it will unlock. And then I can press the ignition, and it starts because it senses the key's presence in its location. So that's the personification of objects, making dumb things smart. The next level is where you've got this partially kind of autonomous sensor networks. And the example here goes back to what I was mentioning before with the city is flooding, let's open a gate. But, another example could be you have a computer, and it senses that it's not in its normal location. It's not in your home, and it's not in your office. Maybe you've decided that day you're going to go to a coffee shop. And at that point, it requires two-factor authentication because it knows, okay, I'm not in a safe zone. This might be a case of a stolen object, so therefore I need to be more rigorous with my security. And then the next one is where you've got autonomous, independent devices. And in this example, you are wearing certain clothes that have sensors in them, and as you walk in the door, it says, oh, okay, this particular person likes these particular brands. Let's send them coupons or offers for those brands so that hopefully they will purchase them again. In healthcare, we already have sensors that go under your skin and can measure your blood and figure out whether you need additional drugs and actually can dispense those drugs. And that's great, but it also can go one step further, which is report back to the doctor how you're doing, and then they may prescribe a different drug that it then will administer. Also, another autonomous independent system could be traffic. So today we already have applications that show us where traffic is heaviest, where it's lightest, but what it could do is take that information and say, okay, this is how traffic is flowing right now. It's really congested in this particular area, and it can change the light system in the city so that it can redirect traffic so that it can unplug the traffic jam. All right. So, challenges. And it still remains today that we've got deployment issues. And the biggest thing isn't the technology at this point. Sensors are actually really cheap. And I know I was talking to a drone company, and the drones were actually run off the sensors that are in my phone. So they're actually cheap. You can get them today, sensors. They're nothing special, and yet that runs some of our coolest technology. So the problem isn't technology. It's really the process and the structure. It's really the people that is the problem. And so the first point here is the significant impact on process and organization. Let's think about a railroad engineer. Before, they only had to interact with mechanical systems. They flipped a manual switch. They looked at manual, gears and metrics that they looked at and then actually had to take physical actions to correct things. At this point, it's now all software operated. So these railroad engineers, instead of dealing with mechanical systems, now have to interact with software. They need to program, operate, and interpret these software-based control systems. Their job has completely changed because now they've got these sensors that they can interact with and software on top of it, which is that control point. So it's a significant interpreting. The next challenge is vendors have really complicated this. We've got vendors who are introducing these Star Wars type, we will manage the universe, cities connected message, and frankly, it freaks us all out. How do we get there from where we are today? And in fact, I just saw a commercial last night from a mega vendor who was talking about the connected city. And so it's hard to make that leap from where we are today to the future. And really what we have today is very narrow problems. I want to make sure that my baby is asleep. I want to be able to know that my traffic system will accommodate me when the traffic gets heavy. I want to know the city doesn't flood. So they have very specific problems that they're trying to solve. And in fact, a paper company decided to use sensors in kilns. A very specific, very narrow problem. What they wanted to do was get better output. And by putting in these sensors and understanding the exact temperature of the kilns, they were actually able to raise their production by 5%. That's a huge gain for a very narrow, very focused problem. Couldn't care less about a connected city. Kilns. That was their narrow focused problem. We also have a lack of solution interoperability. So we've got different vendors offering different things. To monitor if your baby is sleeping is a different system than your thermometer. We do not have a connected home today. So to connect those systems together will be difficult. There's ethical considerations. Should people know what I'm wearing when I enter a store and be able to do very targeted marketing at who I am and what I'm doing and make projections based on that? And that's just part of the concerns about the ethical side of things. Whether we should know about people and where they're going and what they're doing, that's a question. Should we or should we not? And then, of course, security issues are a key barrier. And we think about, okay, everything is driven by the sensors and software as our control point. Well, think about those U.S. railroads and being able to hack into those systems and be able to send trains all over, or fleets of ships or cars. Once we get to self-driving cars, that's a huge issue. Once a new system download comes in and people are able to hack, they could cause crashes or send you anywhere they want to send you. So security issues are still a key barrier here, and we got to get a lot smarter about how we develop our software. Okay, so the next topic is the emerging connected world solution momentum. So because the prices of these sensors are going down, because we can do so much with the current technology today, and because communication technology prices are decreasing, analytic horsepower is increasing, that allows us to really start thinking about these solutions. Going back to the kiln solution, hey, these sensors were cheap. Let's just put them on and see what happens. And then to see a 5% gain in productivity, amazing. Also, we're seeing great movement in regulatory compliance, so addressing those security concerns, also some of the ethical concerns, lots of compliance requirements coming out of energy, transportation, and government sectors. Things that are said, okay, we're going to solve this problem by even this year. Also, with this new application economy, we are in the age of the customer where there is no brand loyalty. People have lots of choices. They will switch. They really want to pursue their customer experience, driven really by these mobile applications and our ability to interact on our mobile devices with products and services. It is changing the way we look at the pace of innovation. When I started out at HP, we had 2-year release cycles. And at this point, mobile releases can release hourly. So, the change of innovation is thought of very differently today than it has been in the past. And of course, with IoT Solutions being software as a control point, the ability to do those software releases very quickly allows that innovation pace to grow. So we need to start thinking about these Internet of Things solutions today. Once again, very narrow, tightly focused, specific use case driven. There are lighthouse use cases already available in many vertical markets. And like I said, we may not be thinking of them as Internet of Things, but that's exactly what they are. Taking these sensors, pulling information off of them, doing that analytics. Maybe we're making smart, dumb things smart. Maybe we're actually doing kind of that interaction where we're taking data and then having a human do the actions, or maybe we're even going so far as doing decisions based on the data and having automatic actions take place. But these solutions, even being very targeted and narrow, can have a significant impact on our business processes, as we've already talked about with the kilns and the paper company. And really, these connected devices allow systems of engagement that are quite intriguing. So, we talked about the optimize and the innovate, and then there's this, customer experience. We could transform what we're doing. And it's because now we can interact with customers using this real-time data. Where are they? Who are they? What are they doing? Information. And ethical considerations aside, that offers a whole stream of new innovation opportunities for us to transform customer experience. You do have to address network and security issues early in the planning and the implementation process. So this is something, if your company says, okay, we're going to start putting a sensor on X, Y, or Z, and we're going to start collecting this data, that is the time to raise network and security issues. Do you have the right bandwidth? Is it the right security? Is the software secure? Is the network bandwidth secure? Where are the systems going to sit? Where are the databases? What kind of software is involved? All those kinds of things you have to start thinking about very early on in the implementation process. These slides really go through specific industries that are adopting. And I kind of showed you the in general adoption rate and how, it's science fact. It's not science fiction, but it's still pretty small. Huge market, but still pretty small. But there are definite industries that are leading, that are taking this forward very quickly. And on this slide, the big winners are energy and mining and in high-tech manufacturing. And those are really stepping forward to say, okay, there's a lot of use cases in these spaces. And if I go to the next slide, the two here are healthcare and financial services. And we've kind of already talked about healthcare, and then financial services, of course, they need to monitor their feeds and speeds, especially to make sure that they are delivering the right services. So already we talked about there's these Internet of Things. Maybe we're not thinking about it that way. Maybe we are. But these are some examples. And I always like to go on this slide starting from the right-hand side and moving my way over to the left because I'm contrary that way. But if we talk about consumer services, we've already talked about thermostats, which is the second to the last on that side. But think about home security. Home security has been around for a long time. And all it is, of course, is sensors. Sensors in your windows and your doors, maybe a motion detector. My dad worked at home, and he works for Oracle, and so we got a home security system quite early. And I didn't, of course, think of it as the Internet of Things. We hadn't branded it that way before. But when I started thinking about this topic, I thought, oh, of course, that is the Internet of Things. And yet it felt groundbreaking at the time that these things were connected, that they were connected by software, that there is a home system that gets alerted if something happens. But truly, as that evolves, that has been the Internet of Things. Focused, narrow solution to a particular problem, but Internet of Things. Security, this affects folks, of course, not only who have, software, that's one kind of security, but really this is more like facilities security, buildings, monitoring buildings and warehouses, that kind of security. So video surveillance, security alerts, all of those things that run on software that take these kind of, whether they be motion sensor or whatever, video cameras that can then upload that data. That is the Internet of Things. Healthcare, we already talked about putting RFIDs into the actual gurneys and the equipment, but also patient monitoring. That is a form of Internet of Things. We talked about the under-the-skin kind of medical devices that can dispense drugs. Internet of Things. Utilities. I was just talking to a client the other day who was actually, they were a utility company. They were moving to you drive by and you're able to take the meter reading. You don't actually have to walk up and look. Well, and thankfully they were already talking about security from the very beginning, which was great. But that is software driven. And do you want people hacking in and saying, oh, this month I have an energy usage of 0? And no, you don't, because then your software once again becomes your control point. And so you don't want people to be able to hack into it or look at it, and you don't want people to be able to, either from the actual home location or from the main site where the data is getting collected. But once again, these utilities moving very slowly into this software-driven meter reading, Internet of Things. In retail and finance, any kind of monitoring on an ATM or kiosk, already Internet of Things. Vendor machine monitoring. When things are empty and they call someone to refill, Internet of Things. Possibly you didn't think of it that way, but really it is. Those are sensors that are then telling folks, okay, I need to be refilled. Better yet, taking that data and looking at trending so they know maybe they should change what's in the vending machine based on usage and the data coming from it. Manufacturing, big implementer of Internet of Things. Inventory control is a big one. Being able to understand what do you have, how fast is it leaving, how fast is it coming in. And then, of course, real-time equipment monitoring, because that can be very expensive. What needs to be fixed, these big machines that move things from one space to another. Transportation, we've already talked about fleet management, understanding where your fleet is. Will it deliver what you are trying to deliver on time to the right people? All of that is great, but there's also things like remote engine diagnostics. When will this truck be down in the future? Is there something we need to do that we can do preventative to keep it up and running? All right. So we've identified the 10 applications that address opportunities in multiple industries. So these are things that don't focus on industry. So we just went through the industry verticals. These are now things that address multiple of those verticals. And we talked about security and surveillance. Facilities, this affects governments. They've got lots of buildings, and they need to secure those buildings. So surveillance and security actually applies to home, government, manufacturing, anybody who has retail, anybody who has a store front, they will need to be talking about security and surveillance. Supply chain management, including relationships, payment processing, all of those things can be handled with sensors. Inventory we talked about, and warehouse. Order tracking, delivery tracking, that affects lots of folks. Retail, it affects not only just the transportation, but also retail. Facility management, any kind of company that owns a facility, whether you are monitoring the design of or the structure of the building, maybe you're doing lighting, maybe you're doing HVAC, whatever you may be monitoring, anybody who has a facility can use Internet of Things to improve themselves. Industrial asset management, location, condition, heavy equipment. We talked about that being in healthcare, also in manufacturing, for example. Smart home management, residential applications, security, but also we just talked about the utilities that are attached to our home. Energy management, usage of water, electricity, and other energy sources, that really pertains to me as a consumer, pertains to the city who's trying to watch it. Do we have enough energy? Could be up to the state, understanding energy levels and energy usage. And then the last thing being fleet management. That could be airplanes, taxis, buses, could be trucks, could be any kind of fleet that you have that operates and you want to understand where it is, what it's doing, what its condition is. So we have a heat map. And the heat map is great because it actually tells us it's a combination of several sources of data. And the heat map comes from asset information that we have from these different verticals. So you've got the verticals across the top from different industries. And so we have the overall asset intensity in those industries. So those folks who tend to have more assets would tend to be more likely to do Internet of Things. We also, of course, have our results from our Forrester surveys, and which we've already talked about in those bar charts, data from those industries on who's adopting, who's not. And then we've got overall IT spend for each industry, and then we've got application maturity, what our survey tells us about the different adoption of these different applications. And what it tells us is that there's some definite hotspots. And the hotspots really focus on folks like inventory and warehouse management for primary manufacturing and transportation, for example. Government is very into security and surveillance and facility management. Makes sense. Utilities and telecom, very big into facilities and fleet management. So as you look at this and you look at, okay, you've got your industries across the top and your applications going down. And so you can find where you're at and then scroll down to see whether you're hot or not. If you are in the gray, you are still nascent. You are not moving a whole lot. That's not to say that, like for the paper company, you aren't looking at Internet of Things for a very targeted, specific use case. It's just that it hasn't taken over the entire industry and everyone's doing it. So let's give an example of facility management in utilities and telecom. And I love this example. I drive to Michigan every summer, to and from. It's a 20-hour drive, and we drive through the great state of Iowa. And in the great state of Iowa, there are tons of these windmills, which is great because they're nice to look at. They're fun to look at. So when I look at this slide, I think of the great state of Iowa. But when something goes wrong with these huge windmills, it's 350 steps up and 350 steps down. So without the Internet of Things, the use case here is if something breaks on these windmills, a technician has to go 350 steps up, figure out what's wrong, come the 350 steps down, get the part, go back up the 350 steps, put in the part, and come down the 350 steps. Now that's if everything works well, if they have the exact right part, if they know exactly how to install the part, and if something goes wrong, they're able to fix it. Otherwise, they're up and down those 350 steps again and again. But with the Internet of Things, think about it this way. An automated service actually calls and says, hey, the windmill, this particular windmill is broken. It knows what service rep is near that windmill. And it says, okay, this is the part that's breaking or has broken. So that service rep, before he climbs up the 350 steps, already has obtained the particular part. So by the time he goes up to 350 steps, he knows exactly what's wrong and has the part to fix it. That being said, now he's got information about the maintenance history. He can get video repair instructions with his tablet, diagnostic tools, maybe even a video link back to an expert if things don't go well. So it is one trip up and one trip down. Internet of Things, making that break-fix a lot shorter. So let's get into the fun stuff. The fun stuff, of course, is in the consumer market. The fleet management, security, surveillance, it's just not cool. But the home, of course, is cool. These consumer-focused products are cool. So let's talk about the cool stuff for just a second. The connected home is really about convenience, peace of mind, efficiency. And so when we look at these solutions that are already offered today, they really are around security. Of course, we've already talked about, the security of your home and that all being sensor-driven. And there's some new projects there that are in the third column. If you want to look at that, there's smart home security devices now that take a lot more data in than just is the window open or closed. The energy and utility, we've also talked about that. Those not only the energy reading, but if we go back to Nest, once again, not a toy to annoy your wife when you're in Vegas, but if you think about this learning thermostat, it actually reduces your energy usage. That's its whole purpose. And so that's great. That's a different kind of ability than we had before. Healthcare, the ability not just I fall and I can't get up, I'm going to push the button, but it's actually monitoring you and knowing if they need to send a healthcare person out to you based on the monitoring of your body and how it's doing. Entertainment, a remote control that's universal. Content is everywhere. Apple TV, for example, runs, can run my movie. I can take stuff from my phone, show pictures. So really being able to pull information from anywhere. And then, of course, the digital self. And, that's great. There's, of course, all of our Fitbits and our, personal devices that tell us how we're doing in our fitness, and that's great. But also managing your personal and digital info. I don't use Evernote in this fashion, but I do know people who do. They use Evernote to take notes on everything from what wine they just drank to recipes, and they include that information everywhere. Dropbox, of course, is family favorite when it comes to pictures and how to share them. So it's really, not only this ability to monitor who you are and yourself and your fitness, but also the ability to manage the data that surrounds us in our personal lives. However, adoption in the home really remains nascent. Now, some of this is because these systems are very disparate. There is no connected home today. And so people, once again, go for these very narrow targeted needs. I don't have a medical device, monitoring me because, I'm not at the age where I need to have a medical device monitoring me. And so that's not a particular need. That's not something I'm going to buy. And so some of it is needs-driven. Some of it is because we've got this disparate kind of viewpoint on our home. But at this point, you're trying to solve one problem. I want a smart thermostat because I want to decrease my energy. I want to know if my baby's sleeping, so I need video surveillance. I want to protect my home, so I'm doing security. So really, the majority, 72%, are solving a single problem. Only 4% are solving 6 different problems. So it really decreases quite fast. And really the median is 1, the mean is 1.6 here. So really targeting a single problem, whatever that particular problem is for you that's most important, and they're solving a single problem, and then waiting until other things are solved. And it's because most consumers don't want a smart home. Frankly, smart home is a lot like smart cities. It's scary. How do I go from here to there? And how do I know that my home won't go crazy while I'm not there and my energy costs will actually increase because it's turned on all the lights and made the heat at 84 and, it's scary. It's a big step. These small, narrow solutions are small steps, and those feel more comfortable. And once again, it's because somebody wants a solution to their need. Who's at the door? Are my plants too dry? Am I wasting energy? Did I turn off the coffee pot? Is my door locked? So it's a very targeted solution. And really, this is going to evolve. I said earlier that Internet of Things isn't an is or an isn't. It's an evolution. And so the smart home will continue to evolve. And whether we think of it or not, it is the Internet of Things. Connected car, and this is a great example because I really haven't thought about, before I got into this topic, how far cars have actually come until I thought back to my first car and the fact that I needed 2 keys, and now I have a key that I don't actually have to turn anything on. But actually cars are very fascinating. The Tesla is a great example of how far cars have gone. The downloads now today will tell you not only where you are, but where your nearest charging station will be, your wait time, how long it will take to charge your car. So it actually tells you how long you're going to be at that next charging station if that's where you choose to go. And it's all in that center console video camera. But a lot of different cars not only have the smart key to the Tesla extreme example where it's giving you a very personalized customer experience, infotainment, and content. You can do web browsing in the Tesla, actually, which kind of freaks me out because you should probably be driving and not doing web browsing, but you can do that. Media and entertainment, being able to hook your phone up into your car system so that you can play your playlist, for example. Then telematics, where you've got navigation, emergency services. So, hey, I've gotten in an accident or my tire has gone out, I need emergency services. And then, crash avoidance. Right now I have sensors in my car that tell me if cars are in my blind spots. I love that. It's fantastic. Autonomous operations, where you've got lane detection, auto park. For those of us who cannot parallel park for our lives, this is going to be a lifesaver because it's going to be able to do this auto park, and it's going to be fantastic. Collision avoidance, taking my indicators of people being in my blind spot one step farther and actually not allowing me to get into an accident. And then, of course, the ultimate goal of self-driving vehicles. We're a ways away, but all these teeny steps that we're taking, first of all, are great because they're teeny steps and they get us used to it, so it's not quite so scary, but also these teeny steps will solve these problems, and ultimately we will get to the car. Now, wearables are the most fun, of course, of all of the Internet of Things. And so Disney today has wristbands that you can go through the park, and of course it's monitoring your moves. It's saying to Disney who's going to what ride, how long the lines are, and who's buying tickets. And so they're monitoring who you are and what you're doing, but you don't have to have tickets anymore, which is a great thing. Being able to get media recommendations based on your mood is something coming in the future. Maybe I want to listen to this playlist or this other playlist. Being able to actually monitor your mood and make those changes automatically is coming as well. And then, of course, being able to track your kids' activities, whether that be from a fitness wearable. Actually, my favorite is the fact that my kid's phone I can do a where's my iPhone, and I can actually track where my son is. Did he make the bus or did he miss it? Where is my kid? Is he on his way home? And so that's my favorite of the wearables is his phone, and I can track where he is. So now we got to get into the serious stuff, which is addressing security and other issues, and that allowing us to unleash our deployment opportunities. So the first thing we need to do is proactively prepare for the connected world. We really have to talk to our app dev folks because, once again, software is our control point. So great, we need to collaborate with them to understand, okay, is this a mobile app? Is this a centralized application where I'm going to be pulling this data into? What kind of network feeds do I need? What kind of security do I need? What kind of databases do I need? All of that you need to start deciding. What is your strategy? And once again, it's great because we're starting out small and very narrow and very targeted, so you don't have to solve the city problem. You're solving a very specific problem. You need to incorporate business intelligence into the value chain because what you're really trying to do is improve processes. Going back to the paper company, they did one thing. They were trying to improve their productivity. Great. So that's a very targeted, small thing. But the business intelligence is, okay, we want to improve our productivity. That is our end goal. You need to address employee and consumer privacy concerns. So, for example, I am walking into a store and they know what I'm wearing. Okay, you need to start thinking up front, how are those consumers going to react to knowing that we know that information about them? And that could be employee, too. If you start wearing Google Glasses and you know where your employees are and what they're doing, how do they feel about that? Should you be taking it around the stores, taking them off when you leave, all those other kinds of things. Implementing processes to monitor connected devices. How do you know the thing is up and it's really the sensor that's telling you it's off and not something else? You just got to start thinking about the downside. How do I know that it's really our device telling us something is wrong? And then, of course, the ability to support the new apps. There's new network, new device availability. So how do we support those new apps? So when we ask people, what are your concerns with deploying machine-to-machine, Internet of Things technologies, of course, the first one that comes up is security. And it's not just the hardware. It's definitely the software. It's definitely our infrastructure. It's how do we prevent, it takes security concerns up to another level because not only do we have personal identifiable information, but we also have information about who they are and what they're doing, where they live, how they're interacting with their world, which becomes another layer of information of concern. Cost, and that really, you can drive that concern down by really being very narrow and focused. And then, oddly enough, the next one is lack of technology maturity. We've kind of already talked about the fact that, these sensors are already there. It's people and process that are going to be tricky. And then, of course, the software that drives this adoption. And then the next two concerns, which I think are very good, are, for example, integration challenges, which of course exist today because we've got narrow, targeted, very different companies serving very different needs, and how do you integrate those systems? And then pricing, being unclear, complicated. So that's another concern going for the Internet of Things. So we really need to consider a lot of different IT issues. The first one being input validation. Once again, do we really know that that's our sensor or someone? The second one, tampering with our system, tampering with our software, tampering with our sensors. We need to understand output integrity. Can our systems be misled? Can it act like it's ours, but it isn't ours? Privacy. Can we really protect that data? The scale of failure. Now, for example, if we all have self-driving cars and we get a software update, you could cause crashes all over the driving world. That's a huge scale of failure. And that goes to our next one, which is then who's responsible? Is it the car manufacturer? Is it the software folks? Is it who's liable in that case? And then, of course, we need to then say, okay, how do we make this bulletproof? How do we make it fail-safe? Okay, so now we've talked about our scale of failure, and it probably freaks us out. We talk about our liability, who is responsible for what. So what we really need to do is make sure everything is bulletproof, that we are really talking about how to prevent failure from happening. And then, of course, government and legislation is going to have to step up in here to really talk to us about data ownership, managing our access to our physical data between interested parties. How does that data, so if I'm somebody who's monitoring people coming into my stores and what they're wearing, maybe I want to pass that information on to the manufacturers. This is who's buying your product. It's people ages between this and this, and it's usually male or female, and they come into our store at this time. Is that information legal to be passed on or not? And so government and legislation is really going to have to step up here too. So what do you need to do to prepare for Internet of Things? The first thing is to keep an eye on big data solutions. With these sensors comes data. And we talked about on that one graph how there's some traditional industrial application sensors. They don't take a whole lot of data. And then when you talk about video surveillance, for example, you're going to get a ton of data. So with these flood of sensors, if you can imagine everything being monitored, we're going to get all of this data to be processed. So we really need to keep an eye on what these big data solutions are and how they can be used to our advantage. We're going to need large databases. They're going to have to be extremely secure, and we're going to need to be able to process that data. Okay, so that means we've evolved from making dumb things smart. Now we're actually doing analytics on the data. Thresholding, automated actions. We're going to need to trust the software that's going to bolster our ability to manage Internet of Things. And, of course, we've got to consider our integration with event management systems. Do we want to know what every sensor is doing at every minute of the day? No. So how do we get it so that there are lots of thresholds and possibly integrate it into our existing event management system, especially if you've really got that area singing? We have to beef up security and authentication systems to protect our data and our systems and our software from malicious attacks. We need to consider growing our asset management to beyond IT assets. Our assets now become our sensors. So we need to be able to keep track of them and any related data to them. So is our sensor going bad? And so now we need to understand a whole new set of assets. Also, we have to consider that these smart devices are going to go from home to the workplace. And bring your own device kind of caught us off guard. It happened what felt like overnight. We had these devices in our workplace that we weren't expecting. We need to expect these wearables to be coming into our workplace. For example, policies around Google Glasses. Decide it. Do it early. We have to almost be futurists and say, okay, what's coming and how are we going to handle it? And do not let your imagination fail you. And the example that I like to use here is Apollo 1. where those 3 astronauts burned in their capsule here on Earth. And it's because when they went into Congress, they were asked, okay, what was the failure here? And the response was a failure of imagination. No one thought that filling a capsule with 100% oxygen with all those yards of extra Velcro would have any sort of issue. No one thought we'd have a catastrophic event here on Earth. And it was that lack of imagination, that lack of what is our size of our failure? How do we make this fail-safe? People weren't thinking about that. And so we had this very terrible accident, caused loss of life because we didn't have the imagination, not only to see the possibilities of what we could do with the Internet of Things in this example, not in this astronaut example, but in the Internet of Things we have to use our imagination not only to see the upside, but also the downside so that we know what to do and how to prevent it from failing. All right, so now I think we're ready for, closing, so I think I hand it back off to you, Rob.
Hi, thank you, Amy. That's a lot of interesting information. Before we begin today's Q&A, please fill out the feedback form that has opened on your computer. To complete the form, please press Submit Answer at the bottom of the page. Thank you in advance for filling out your feedback form. Your participation in the survey allows us to better serve you. So now on to Q&A. We have a few questions stacked up. If you haven't asked your questions, please be sure to ask them in the Q&A section. So, Amy, the first one's up for you. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, this one is, do you think that VIP support will begin to include all those connected home devices for execs?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the Internet of Things and creating a differentiated customer experience, I think we are going to see different levels of support. You're going to be able to pay more for advanced security options than not, for example. And so, yeah, I think we will see differentiated support and services once these different areas take off. Yep.
Okay. When I was reading that question, I was thinking how I would have to reorganize my group to handle something like that. One more tool in the toolbox, huh? The next question is about healthcare. Will the same people who are supporting carts and other computer devices now be supporting many other connected devices in the near future?
And the answer is yes. So we in IT, once again, when we think about our IT assets, it's going to go beyond what we currently think of today as our laptops, our servers, our data centers. We're going to have to start thinking about these sensors and where they live and what data it's telling us and be able to act on it and be able to do break-fix very quickly on these things. Probably not on the equipment itself, but on the sensors and the data that we're getting back from these devices. So, yep.
Continuing on that thought, I wonder, today a technician, an IT tech goes in to fix something IT in the hospital. Are their medical skill sets going to have to raise if we're going to have devices that get implanted under the skin to administer medicine?
Yeah, I think those will probably be very specialized people who, and whether that be in the medical field or not, probably not the IT person who's going to have to monitor it. Now, that being said, the IT person may have to know if somebody has hacked into one of those devices, so security will be a concern, monitoring what's going on with that, and then knowing when it's breaking might be something we have to handle and then forward on to the proper medical person. Okay.
One more question for you. Do we foresee a time when our entire fleet of computers will be monitored the way trucks can be so that the information will feed into ITSM support tools automatically? So they call home, if you will?
Right. Yeah, and there's no reason why we can't manage our fleet of computers this way. The The interesting thing, though, is that our devices are getting cheaper, and I'm using air quotes so everybody cannot see it. But imagine me using air quotes are becoming cheaper and cheaper. And so it's probably not something that a company is going to want to keep track of. The location, yes. Being able to shut it down if it is stolen, yes. But after that, we probably don't care. You probably care, like we talked about, your computer being in an unsafe location and understanding that maybe it needs additional authentication, but that's really the device itself. Not managing a whole fleet. IT asset management is going to take a huge leap in the next few years. We're going to stop thinking about these devices that, once again, using air quotes, are cheap, and it's really going to come down to what data we have access to and what applications we have access to. Yep.
It sounds like the world's going to be changing really fast. Hey, the next two questions are for Dave and Lauren. Are you still on the line? Well, it looks like they might have left. Well, I'd like to thank both Amy and Dave for taking the time out to be with us today and sharing us all this information. It's been really informative. So folks, within the next 24 hours, you will receive a follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation in case you would like to watch it again. And again, we'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar. Brace yourselves, because the Internet of Things is coming. Join us next month for our virtual event, the HDI 2015, A Digital Experience. On the behalf of me and all the board members of the V chapter, we'd like to thank everyone for attending, and we'll leave the conference live for a few more minutes if you want to finish up your chats. Otherwise, everyone take care, and we'll see you next month.